Move this off to the side here, Todd. Got something else going on today. But we have a little teaching with object lesson thing, so I'll set it up. I'll move my props around while I'm setting it up. But in 1963, which is a throwback moment for some of you, but personally for me, it was one of the greatest years ever, because a certain young lady was born in 1963 who now shares a home with me. So it was pretty important for me, 1963, January 25th to be exact. I say that so I don't forget it, because it's coming up, and more times I remind myself of that date, the more likely it is that I'll remember it on time. But 1963, two gentlemen got together and composed one of the most familiar Christmas songs that there are. These two gentlemen composed It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year song sung by Andy Williams. And if you listen to 99.1 now or whatever your favorite all-time and always plays Christmas songs, you're going to hear songs like this over and over, right? And this song has a wonderful idea. It says it's the most wonderful time of the year over and over. It also says it's the most happiest season of all. And so I agree with that to a point. But I'll say I think it was easier in 1963 to possibly see how wonderful and happy everything was. It feels a bit more complicated to me. So I went back to 1963 to say, is that really the case? Well, some of the things, as you look at them today, would remind us of, yeah, that would have been a great time to be alive, right? Like the fact that a new house costs $12,650. If you're thinking about putting a front door on, you better have about $12,000 right now on your house, okay? It's just how life has changed, right? But gas costs 29 cents a gallon. I mean, that would have been a good day to be alive, right? Although the average income was $5,800 per year, okay, just bringing that up. And a new car costs $3,200. A new car costs $3,200. The Beatles released I Want to Hold Your Hand, which I sing every night to my wife. She's not in here, see? You can't tell you no. Okay, but there she's in the back now, scowling. Sorry, babe. But I want to get to the fun stuff. Here's the fun stuff about 1963, okay? The fun stuff is these are the movies that people were going to see in 1963. Cleopatra, Lawrence of Arabia, The Longest Day, Mutiny on the Bounty, and To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, probably don't have enough drama for today, but that's what was happening. And the popular musicians were people, most of you won't know these, but anyway, the Beatles, Ray Orbison, Buddy Holly, the Drifters. Okay, but listen to this, people, the favorite TV program. This definitely tells you it was a more wonderful, happy time of the year in 1963. The Dick Van Dyke Show. 1963, the Dick Van Dyke Show. The Andy Griffith Show. What show is bad when there's a guy and his son going fishing, walking down the road whistling, right? It's just awesome stuff. The Flintstones. Let's meet the Flintstones, have a yabba dabba do time. The old people are going, no, and young people are going, what's wrong with that guy? No, that was actually the song. It really was. But my favorite, which today there's just miraculous things that happen all the time in TV, like, the bad guys can't shoot straight, but the good guy, every time he shoots it, all that miraculous stuff. Well, old days, 1963, there was some miraculous stuff too, because there were talking animals. Mr. Ed in 1963, a horse that you could walk up to the stall and start talking to. Wow, those are simpler times, right? 1963. It was a wonderful, happy time of year. To understand life in 1963, probably not comparable, but even Christmas, right? Christmas for all of us, as we started out, was this pretty simple deal. It was like in our house, with Kathy and myself and our two daughters and the four of us, and it was Christmas time. But as life got going and moved along, Christmas became from simple to kind of complicated. To even in our house now, it's, well, where will we go and who's going to be where and who's going to be doing what? And that's just the beginning of complications to even a season like this. So this is kind of a premise you can kind of bank on, that Christmas exaggerates the bad things while at the same time reminding us of the remarkable. Some of those tough moments in life get exaggerated in the holiday times, like the complicated moments. And we're talking about kind of ours is on the simple side. Some of you have real complicators to the holiday season. Broken families and things like that add complicators of where people will be. And can we have this person in our home or not have that person? So I start out today by saying I do believe, based on our faith, it is the most wonderful time of the year, the happiest time. But the culture and the world we live in tell us to be real. And so this morning, in a real simple, like object lesson kind of way, I just want to remind us of why it is wonderful and why it is a happy time. So here's the word that I want you to focus on this morning. There are two words that are going to be totally striking. This word, first of all, is where most of us live, and it's what's happening in our world. And I'm going to let some pictures speak for themselves, but I'm just going to tell you that what's happening around us is very interesting in this time of year. So what's happening around us is, first of all, we have problems that we can't solve. So poor Clark Griswold had gone to great lengths to decorate his house for Christmas. If you've seen Christmas Vacation, you understand the amount of effort that Clark went to try to get the lights to work on the house. Several funny scenes, but then the moment comes where he plugs the one cord into the other cord and nothing happens. We all have this, people. We all have problems around the holidays that we can't fix. That's a very simple problem, maybe with the lights. Yours might be more complex. Yours might be a relationship problem that on the holidays you are not looking forward to wonderful and happy. You're trying to just make it through the heartache of a relationship, a problem that you can't fix. The second thing that happens around this time of year is we have people in our lives that bring on some of the most difficult moments. I hope you don't have a cousin Eddie. It's possible that some of you do. If I see a motorhome parked outside of your house this Christmas season, an old beat-up motorhome, I will be feeling bad for you. Like Clark said at one point in Christmas Vacation, right? Eddie, I'd like to drive you out somewhere and leave you. Okay, that's what we feel like about some of the people in our lives at the holidays, because life has become complicated and broken and difficult. And so some of you, in real fashion, no joking, are not looking forward to the holidays because there will be people that are going to be tough to deal with. And the final thing is what's happening around us is the expectations that are mounting about a holiday season. This is how Clark saw Christmas. Just our wonderful family gathering, right? Now just go back in time, all of you. And to you young parents, you're doing this right now. You are creating that perfect Christmas picture, aren't you? Remember this from the past, some of us. This is my mind. I can remember my mom created the perfect Christmas picture. I will not show it to any of you. It was my brothers and myself, three of us. I was the oldest, the tallest, and my brother scrooched down, and my brother was in a chair. We were all wearing matching red and white pajamas in front of a fireplace. It was the perfect three-boy household Christmas picture. But some of us live in the world of expectations around the holidays, and with social media, it's ramping up to some epic proportion now that we have to match what so-and-so put on. Look at their Christmas gathering. And the fact of the matter is these expectations are crushing us sometimes. To have this beautiful time and everything works and everything tastes great. Huh? Come on, some of you ladies in the room. This isn't going to be fun for you because you're going to go, the gravy doesn't taste quite right today. Because you want this, your expectations are so high. So this is what's happening. And then there's another moment for all of us as people of faith. It's not to focus on what's happening. This, by the way, is part of everybody's life. This is where we begin to find our hope. We begin to find our hope not in what is happening, but in what happened. And as we change our perspective, our point of view, it radically changes our holiday season. Because instead of being locked into things over here, we begin to focus over here on what happened a couple of thousand years ago. John was probably most scholars believe the Apostle John was probably the oldest writer of one of the Gospels. So you have 4 Gospels, right? And if you're not familiar with the Bible is a big 66 books written over hundreds of years and can be pretty complex. If you're not familiar of it, start in one of these 4 Gospels, they call them: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're 4 guys from their perspective who wrote about walking with Jesus. They had personal experience with him. They were side by side, saw this stuff, and through the wisdom and inspiration of the Holy Spirit, wrote it down. So, for instance, Matthew wrote as a tax collector. So, Matthew starts his gospel in the coming of Jesus, Christmas, with a genealogy. He wrote a whole list of people, and this person and begat, and this person related to, and it will be just like your family tree. Ours is a little bit warped, but yours is probably good, right? Because there's some Uncle Eddies and Cousin Bills in ours but just in all seriousness, that's how he wrote from his perspective. Mark doesn't say a whole lot about the birth of Jesus. He kind of takes this real small snippet and says there was this John the Baptist guy, and he told you somebody was coming, and he launches into who Jesus is. Luke, probably the most popular of the Christmas kind of accounts. Luke was a doctor. And so as a physician, he wrote through that, and he wrote things about how the birth took place and where it was and who was there and details like that, and the whole idea of the virgin birth. And now we come to John, the most experienced, they believe, probably the oldest to write his gospel. John's gospel was probably written 80 to 90 years after the birth of Christ. It's the longest kind of far out there gospel, most scholars believe. But John has a unique perspective in writing about Jesus. You see, at the crucifixion of Jesus, it's Jesus who points to John and says, take care of my mother. You take care of her. And you, Mom, you hang out with him. In other words, for many years, John was with Mary, the mother of Jesus. So he knew firsthand from Mary's account what happened in that manger. And all of the details were very common to him, and he probably spent a lot of his life recounting those stories to people, because that's how it worked back then. You didn't go online and you didn't read this, you talked to somebody. Do you ever have wonderful moments like that in your experience as a person? You get to sit with somebody, instead of reading a book, they tell you a story. And it comes alive because they're telling it, and they bring the details to life, and it engages you and it draws you in like nothing written down ever can. And if you don't have that in your household, I suggest you continue that. Because there's nothing that passes on the things of life better than a face-to-face story. You have these in fun ways, right? At our house, they come like this: remember when, and then people start laughing. And it's normally, remember when Dad did. And then there's some moment. Then I probably did it. But so much better than, oh, I'm going to text you this. Remember when Dad, and text. No, when you're sitting there face to face and now you're laughing. When the girls and Kathy are out Christmas shopping, she calls me. 30, 45 seconds, a minute, no talking, just laughing. I'm like, hello, hello. And it's all about, it's so much fun with the girls. And this happened. And to me, it's like, really? No, because I wasn't there. I'm arm's length away. I don't think it's that funny. And that they can't stop laughing. It's the idea of face-to-face sharing and the emotion that goes. So here's John, and he spent many years of his life recounting, and then I was there. And you should have seen when they lowered the guys through the roof, and he gives these stories over and over about Jesus. And now he's an old man. And not only has he seen that part of the life of Jesus, the firsthand knowledge of the life of Jesus, and not only has he run to the tomb after seeing Jesus crucified and gets there and there's no stone and there's no body, but he's seen all the heartaches. This is years later. Go back in history now and read. This is some fascinating stuff to understand the perspective of the writer. Read about the fact that John is around when Nero sends his guys from the Roman Empire to besiege the city of Jerusalem around AD 60, late 60s, AD 70, right in there. And they lay siege to a city, and they build a trench around it. Nobody in, nobody out, and people begin to starve to death. And these are John's friends, and people believe possibly John was inside of Jerusalem when this was happening. Either way, it's crushing his spirit, because this is the holy city. This is God's place. And it ends with the destruction of the temple. The very stuff that's dear to him as a person. He watches the darkness come in, and he watches the things be taken from him. And his personal journey is no better. These disciples that he hung out with, these guys that he shared the gospel with, especially Peter and Paul, are both, by the order of Nero, executed. And this is post all of that, and that's just this little snippet. There's tons of stuff in there in his life. After that, he decides to write, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, the Gospel of John. Now go into the Gospel of John with me to the 20th chapter. So near the end of the Gospel, he gives you an idea of why. This is kind of cool, because as you look at stuff, like if I were to write a letter to you, what's my purpose? Why did I write this letter to you? Hey, things are going great, maybe. But usually there's something I'm trying to communicate. And John says near the end of his writing, this is why I'm writing to you people. John chapter 20, verse 30. He writes, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. In case you think I got everything on paper, John says, I just want you to know there's a lot more to the story. But here's my purpose, verse 31. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. I took the time, he says, to record the things that I saw and experienced with Jesus and watched happen so that you could understand, that you could go beyond understanding, he says, verse 31, that you could go to belief. You see, this is Christmas right now, everyone. And there's a big difference between understanding and believing. There's a big difference between knowing and knowing through experience. All around you, you're going to travel everywhere you go. You're going to be seeing signs of people who know the Christmas story. But will you know it to the point of experiencing it? That's what John is saying. I didn't write a history book to you only. Yes, it's history. This is what happened. But my purpose in writing it was to help you go beyond just your head and to go to the experience of your heart. He says that by believing, you may have life in his name. So what happened? Here's what John says happened. In these verses, John says, first of all, in him, let's go to chapter 1 now, verse 4. Chapter 1 of John's Gospel, verse 4. I wrote these things so you could have life in his name. Verse 4 of chapter 1. This is how John gets into the Christmas story, by the way, totally unique to everyone else's perspective. In the beginning, he says, was the Word was with God, verse 1. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, verse 3. Verse 4, in him, so this is how John starts the Christmas side of his story. He starts it with the person of Jesus Christ, in him. It's way more significant than you think it is. When John says in him, he is not comparing Jesus to someone else. He is saying the one and only Son of God, in him. You see, at this point, there's like a Y in the road. So if everyone was claiming to have some system of faith and some founder of it, here's the separation: God's only Son from everybody else. Because other people will claim to be representatives of people, but only one Son of God, in him. In him, he says, Jesus Christ, in him. He's the only begotten Son. He's the only Son of God to be born of a virgin birth. No other founder of any other system or any other religion can claim virgin birth. None of them can claim miraculous powers recorded in history like Jesus. None of them were murdered and resurrected on the third day. None of them claim that their stripes are our source of healing. None of them. And for John, he wants to say right off the bat, I want you to know the source of a wonderful, happy time of the year is the person of Jesus Christ. It's not a religious thing. It's not a system. It's not a membership in something. It's not a baptism. It's a personal relationship, a one-on-one relationship with the only begotten Son of God, who came into the world not to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. The source of our happiness is found in a person, not in a system, but in a person. And he says, goes on to say, not that person in him was life. And so what happened back then was life came into the world. And this is awesome to those of us who have any passion when we get up in the morning, like I explained to me, and we hit the floor and we wonder how cool today can be. What does God have? It's because life is passion and meaning and significance and value and those kind of things that drive us to get out of bed in the morning. Jesus is the source of them. In him was life. It's not meant to be boring, people. I mean, some of you came in here today and I'm like, really? How's that life going? You're like, not so good. It's hard outside. I know. But he came to be life. He came to be excitement and joy and happiness and peace and purpose. And those kind of things are your choices. You choose to say, I follow and have a personal relationship with Jesus, who is the source of my life. Therefore, that doesn't change when the outside stuff changes. Last week, Daryl stands up here and says, oh, by the way, I lost my mother, 2 of my brothers, and my wife to cancer. And what did he say? I never lost the source of my real life stuff. He never left me because he is my life. In the darkest of moments, Daryl's testimony was that Jesus was my life, still is my life. And that life, he says, is to be a light. Translated into our world today, he says it's supposed to be a light to all mankind, meaning that those of you who have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, he is your life, you are his light into this dark, dark world. It's an awesome idea. You can see the flow of it. I enter into a personal relationship with Jesus, and he becomes my life. He gives me purpose and meaning and value, and I think what I do means something. And at that point, as you practice the life, you become the light. It's not the other way around. You are not the light trying to figure out what to do with your life. I know it feels like that sometimes. But ultimately, to understand this is to understand in him was life. And that life was the light of the world, the light to all mankind. And then John does something as if he figures it out. As if when he's writing this to you and I, he goes, this is going to be more difficult. And now he reflects backwards on all the difficulties that he's seen. I just recounted a few of them through history. But it's not historical to him, it's personal to him. And there's personal loss in his life. And there's the destruction of things that were very valuable to him. And the actual Son of God, who he knew personally, walked with, is gone. At the end of this verse, though, he says, I got to tell you something from my experience. And this, I think, is the most important part of these couple of verses and the source of why you and I can say it is a wonderful time of year. Because John writes that the darkness cannot overcome the light. Now listen. This is an old guy, and he's seen a whole bunch of stuff a long time ago in history. But this is the most relevant, alive, today message to everybody in the building, that you too have experienced the darkness, but you have the life of Jesus Christ in you, and he is your light, and that light cannot be extinguished by the darkness. Because that's how you feel from time to time. Don't you? Don't I? Don't we feel like something we're going through or something that happens to us has somehow extinguished the light? And John says, I just got to get out there for you people and tell you it can't happen. The light cannot be overcome by the darkness. Come on, that's somebody's hope today. That's somebody's moment today, because this last week, these last 24 hours, this last month, this last year, I don't know, but all you knew was darkness, and you started to think that it was overcoming the light. God felt distant to you. Circumstances seemed overwhelming. There wasn't that big answered prayer thing. And today you are reminded that you can have a wonderful, most wonderful time of the year, the happiest time of the year, because the light can't be overcome by the darkness. It can't be overcome by the darkness. If it happens once, it's all a scam. If there's one point where God is not able, he's not able in anything. It is an all or nothing proposition. It is either he is the light, and that is my life, and it can't be overcome by the darkness or its hopelessness. I've watched you live. You've proved this out. So many of you sitting here today have proved out that the darkness cannot overcome the light. Because I've been with you. I've listened to you. I've seen your tears. I've felt your heartache. But at the end of the day, you came to this conclusion. The darkness cannot overcome the light. That's faith. That's faith. And so John begins his version of the holidays, his version of Christmas, his version of the birth of Jesus by saying, I'm not going to talk about shepherds. I'm going to talk about the significance of the birth of Jesus. And that significance is that you will walk in darkness. And by my experience as a person, John writes, by the testimony of the people around me, carried forward now for thousands of years, we see the same truth today, that the darkness cannot overcome the light. I'm encouraging some of you today that it may seem like a little pin speck of light in a massive darkness, but the darkness cannot overcome the light. Your plight, your position, whatever is happening in your life, as dark as it seems or feels, doesn't have the power you're giving it. Darkness cannot overcome the light. Because that light is my life, it's your life, through the birth of the person of Jesus Christ, who came into the world, like I said earlier, not to condemn the world, but to save the world. Let's stand. God, I thank you this morning that you are light. Everyone in this room knows the value of light when they've gotten up in the darkness of the bedroom trying to find their way to another room. That's just a small picture of the light of life. I sense this morning that this group of people has definitely a familiar moment with darkness. Yet it is our hope, the light is our hope, and we want to again affirm today that no matter the position we're in, that the darkness cannot overcome the light. And just before I close today, with everybody in respectful, not looking around, but I want to know how I can pray for you. Who in here wants to be honest enough this morning by raising their hand to say, pray for me because it feels like the darkness is winning? Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and you, thank you all. God, you see the honest moments of people this morning, and we know that's the truth. And I thank you for them sharing their heart this morning with you and with myself. Walk with these people who their life darkness stuff is just seeming so overwhelming. Remind them again and again this week that the darkness cannot overcome the light. Show them your love. In some extraordinary way or some simple way, show them the love of God, which is the light. We will be determined today as a group of people leaving this place to be that light. Because we have that opportunity. We can walk into our community, people that think there's only darkness, and we can show them light. And we can witness to them by just the way we live that darkness cannot overcome the light. May we head into this holiday season with the expectation that it's a wonderful time of the year, it's a happy time of the year, but knowing full well that we carry with us the light. And that light is Jesus. We thank you for this day, for the opportunity to gather and worship here in Christ's name. Amen.